How's it going, Andrew?
What's going on, Matt?
Not much. That was a good practice we just had.
Yep, it was very technical. Yeah, very technical, which is good.
Yep, especially, conferring a Master Mason degree at a big, day of light like that. Yeah, you got to get into the nitty-gritty.
Yep. Do you know how many candidates are going to be there?
It sounded like 17.
17. Yep, and for our listeners, that we're helping out with one of the Grand Lodge's one-day classes. But yes, we just had a long practice. We're conferring the MM degree, so it's going to be a good one.
Oh, yeah. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. That's the one I haven't conferred at a day of light yet, so I finally get the hat trick and can retire.
There you go. Perfect. Cool. Well, we can talk all day, but we also have a very special guest waiting.
Very special guest.
So, we will get you guys some music, and then we will introduce them in just a few seconds here.
All right. Sounds good. Let's go.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right, do we just try to call him on this thing and see if he answers?
You got the recording paused, right?
Nope.
All right. So on today's episode, we have Right Worshipful Brother Jim Hall from Ohio. He is also host of the Traveling Man Masonic Podcast. Thanks for coming on, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Matt and Andrew, for having me. I'm pretty pumped to be here. Usually I'm on the other end, so it's nice to kind of be waiting for questions to come in and go from there. So thank you.
For our listeners, can you just give them a quick high level of your Masonic titles, history, all that kind of good stuff?
Sure. So I've been a Mason just over 11 years now. I am a District Deputy Grand Master in the 24th Masonic District of Ohio, past Master of East Palestine Lodge number 417, York Rite, Scottish Rite Shrine, working on Grotto, all the others, AMD, that whole spiel, We don't need to get into that. I do work for the Grand Lodge of Ohio as their director of programs, which that's sort of a social media, behind the scenes membership management type of thing, website. And I also work as a marketing and social media for Bear Auctioneer and Realty in Rogers, Ohio.
Right on.
So that's the high level.
Sweet. That's some pretty big accolades there.
That also sounds like a busy week.
You're right.
So you're touching me on one of 4 computer screens right now. So yeah, it's I work in the basement, so I kind of a hermit at times, but it's exciting. A lot of fun stuff behind the scenes. Right
on. So what brought you to Freemasonry when you first decided to venture down this path?
It kind of it's kind of a stepped story here. So, my grandfather was a Mason, and I can remember he had the emblems on the back of his car. My grandma would always say, I'm going to stars. No idea what that meant. I honestly thought she meant the church choir because they stood in front of people and sang. They're stars. They stand up there. I don't know.
Right.
Small town. But he passed before I ever got to ask him anything about it. My father wasn't a Mason, and and as bad as this sounds, the movie National Treasure came out.
Same situation.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it just there was that little pang of, hey, I can remember my grandpa's ring, and it was just a vision. I couldn't remember anything else, and I just said, I'd like to do that, and my wife's like, well, go join. I'm like, I don't know how. There isn't hey, go do this. 11 years ago, it wasn't as open on social media. We weren't pushing out, so I kind of just sat there, and I went down to the lodge one time, and the door was locked, as they almost always are, except for a night or two or a random weekend. And I just kind of let that sit for almost 8 years. And I went to work one day. The gentleman was a Mason. I thought he was talking about the Moose Lodge. He was talking about the Masonic Lodge, and we spoke all day about it. Had the petition, and I'm a lover of history, American history, medieval, European history, that sort of thing. So, I mean, it was a draw right off the bat. It all was right in the sweet spot with me. So we, just talking about that and all of the huge historical figures that helped build this country that were a part at some point or another in our Masonic realm. It just was like, wow, I got to check this out and see. And then once he started pointing out people that were Masons that, they're not wearing a ring, they're not wearing a shirt, but, they're past masters or they're the secretary or treasurer or whatever it is. It's like, wow, what is this? I need to know more. So that was the initial push to get in.
I kind of had a similar thing where I always have to use, when everyone asks me, I have to use National Treasure, which no Mason's proud of. We're like, all right, I got to say it.
Right. It's one of those
Nicolas
things.
Cage, the Declaration of Independence, got me going. But for me, it was just what got the Freemasons for Dummies into my wish list. On Amazon. I was watching a movie. I was like, oh, I am curious. What are those guys about? Threw it on the wish list. Forgot about it for years until it went on sale. And then I got a notification on my phone, like, that book you want is on sale. And I was like, oh, I did want to read that. And same kind of thing. Thanks, National Treasure.
Right, for sure. I mean, National Treasure was one of those things. But, my wife is totally convinced that at some point we are going to have to go on some crazy Masonic adventure. She knows what the organization is all about at this point, but she is still convinced at some point we're going to have to do this. And I was like, that'd be great, but I doubt it.
say I'm ready for the call. I've been waiting for 11 years. Get my leather satchel and we'll go.
You got to use heat on the map. Don't forget.
Right.
Make the secret message appear.
Lemon juice to make the secret message appear. Something.
Put it in the oven. Right. Cool. Yep. So you've been a Mason for 11 years. You're involved in a bunch of stuff. What convinced you to stay? What keeps you in Masonry and keeps you happy in Masonry?
The very beginning was just pure curiosity. I obviously, I'm learning our ritual returns, and I didn't realize at the beginning of my Masonic journey that's not standard across the country or world. Right. So, in Ohio, we have a return that we have to learn and then present back to the lodge so that they know we're kind of proficient in what that degree meant. And so just that curiosity, and it was the initial connection with my mentor, which was the gentleman I was working with, Brother Ryan Crisano. We were moving furniture together, and I worked with him every day on top of learning this new thing. So it kind of took a work relationship, and it made it a really strong friendship because we were, working on returns, and you do that in Ohio back and forth one-on-one. Mm-hmm. So it was him and I the whole way through. So that was the start. And then, I kind of view it as an onion.
No, and I think that it's kind of fun that your mentor was a guy that you were working with. Like, that makes it convenient to do the mouth-to-ear type of work.
Yeah. I mean, just in that delivery truck driving, a couple hundred miles a day, there's a lot of downtime where we can really perfect our art,
Well, and I had a similar experience to that. The gentleman that was responsible for finally bringing me to a lodge was actually a co-worker of mine who happened to be the son of a Mason and was always talking about demolay. And I was like, what the heck is this demolay stuff? So then he kind of explained to me what it was. And then, I ended up meeting his dad and, joining the fraternity. But since we worked together, we were going through our degrees at the same time. So we were always studying with each other because he could study with his dad at home. So he was always a couple steps ahead of me. So it worked out. It worked out really well. He was 18 at the time. So he was just starting his Masonic journey as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you've had, how long have you been doing the Traveling Man podcast? And for our listeners, you can find that anywhere you can listen to podcasts, Traveling Man Podcast. I'm sure most of them actually probably are aware of it to begin with. Right. But how long have you been doing the podcast for?
I've been doing the podcast, feels like a lifetime.
I know that feeling.
It's like one of those, a lifetime in a minute. I want to say it's just over 3.5 years, something like that. We release it bi-weekly, so it gives me a break. But just sitting back and thinking of 102 episodes, which we're on now, it's hard to believe. That's
right.
As you guys know, the rigmarole of finding guests or finding content and producing and editing and marketing, and It's just
it's a lot.
It's a lot, but
it's another appendant body.
Yep.
Well, you know what? You're right, but the beautiful thing is, the payoff is, and I get messages on the random that, hey, I found, and I just got one recently. I found your podcast, and I'd been away from Freemasonry, let my dues lapse for like 3 years, and I just got my dues up to date, and I'm looking forward to getting back in the lodge. I'm really excited about it. So, like, a message like that makes all that work. Like, if I spread that light of Masonry just a little bit for people, then it was all worth it.
Right. Agreed.
And and one thing that's cool about the medium that we work at is that, like, there are a subset of brethren who, for reasons sometimes even against their will, they're not able to attend lodge. Maybe they moved, maybe they're in the military, and they're out on deployment, maybe they're somewhere else. Being able to provide Masonic content via podcast is great, because I feel like it's a way to include those brothers who are maybe missing lodge too and can't attend as regularly as they'd like, because life circumstances happen. They happen to all of us, and so it's kind of cool when you have those types of moments.
Yeah.
What inspired you to start doing this appendant body?
I think my wife telling me to stop talking to her about it was, anybody that gets on a podcast, they're obviously talkers, number one. And number two, they love what they're doing. Otherwise, why would you be doing it? That's crazy.
Right.
So I'd been kicking around something else, something to get the word out there on a, less stated meeting type of feel. And my wife actually brought up podcasting, and I'm like, I can barely talk just a person face to face. I don't know how this podcast is going to work. And she's like, listen, you try it. I'll have my parents get you your first microphone or something for Christmas. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we got the microphone. It was the wrong type. Like it recorded everything around instead of just my voice, so you could hear the water pipe overhead, like the first few episodes.
That's where we started. Yep.
Just a constant echo.
Echoes. And I mean, the first one, I just wanted to do a intro on who I was and why I joined. And I kind of read it off and listened to it. I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. I wouldn't listen to this, and I lived it. So I deleted that, had a buddy come over. We had a few bourbons and eased into the first episode. It's choppy, as all first episodes are, right? But, got us off on the right foot.
I mean, that's always kind of fun, though. Like, I like when I listen to podcasts going back to the originals, because you'll be like, oof, and then you'll be like, oh, look at this. This is completely different as you go through 6-7 episodes. Like, Matt and I definitely the first probably 3-ish episodes really had to take time to find our podcast voice, how to we do this fun game where whenever I'm editing, I ask Matt the count, because the AI software that I use counts the ums, ers, and otherwise as the filler sounds, and I'll be like, hey, if it's under 100, we're doing good. But
I love it. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
No, I used to, probably the first, I don't know how many, I can't think off the top of my head. It was a handful at the beginning. All the ums, the likes, I cut them all out. I'm like, what is this? This is terrible. And then eventually I'm sitting there and I'm like, I think it was probably because I was editing the night before it came out and was tired. And I'm like, you know what? I don't talk like that. I use ums and ers, and everybody else does too, so I'm just leaving them. The heck with it.
Right.
And it's made my life a lot easier.
So I use a software that automatically will delete them. And so it's,
wow.
And I can send you that information after the episode, but I use it because it'll identify them, and I can click just a switch and say delete them all. And then when I'm going through, if something sounds weird, I'll be like, maybe keep that one. It sounds like it was necessary. But yeah, so I'll cut them because on one of these ones, I swear, I think we had a guess, and there was I don't know.
It was almost 200.
I had one that I think was about 300 ums. And when I cut them, it shaved 2 to 3 minutes off the episode. And I went, I'm just saving people time.
No, it is an interesting journey, though, to especially, as like you slowly upgrade your tech and stuff doing this, and hear how much better it sounds and how much more comfortable you get with a microphone in front of you, and, just kind of easing into it and realizing like Andrew and I really don't like script in these at all. And I think for the most part, you have like a list of questions that are kind of your go-tos with guests, but I feel like you're like us. You follow the rabbit holes. Wherever the guest takes you is where you're kind of willing to go.
Because it's not an interview. It's a fellowship, right?
Right.
Well, and that's the thing too. If you get a script, then I feel like you start to get too boxy. I feel like, there's the... Yeah, and we're all going to say, how'd you get into masonry? Because you have to. That,
right.
That's
the Masonic icebreaker. Yeah.
Well, and like I say, like they're all different and exactly the same. Like everybody's has it. Whether it's a dad, it's national treasure, it's a sign, and then the get in and the curiosity or whatever. But yeah, I really like the sporadicness of just going and finding your voice. That's the thing. You guys are nice. You have each other to key off of. Like if the last one I did was just a recap. I really struggled to do singles because I don't have anyone talking back to me. So it's goofy. But if I'm doing that, I'll put my phone up on the stand and record myself back at me. So it looks like I'm talking. It sounds quirky, but it's the only way I can talk and feel like I'm talking to somebody and not a wall.
No, that makes sense. I got to give you credit for those ones where you do like a recap of an event and just tell like basically a story from beginning to end, and it's just you the whole time. I'm like, man, I don't know if I could do that.
Well, you forced me to do a couple of those episodes, like Thanksgiving and the 4th of July, where like those are the first ones that have had like 5 takes. Where I'm like, did I do it? And I go, that sucked. And I go, I got to do it again. That was so bad, because the same thing where like when you're with another person, like if you're pausing or you mess up, like it doesn't sound like there's anything there. It's like, oh, they're just having a conversation. That happens. But when it's just you, it's like oppressive, where you're like, I can feel it.
Yeah, there's the dead space there, right? Yeah.
It's horrible as I'm staring at like those ones. I've gone a little bit more like when I rehearse to like script it a little bit, because I'm like, I can start casual on the first take, but after that, it's got to get a little more refined, because I start to like lose my train of thought. I'm like, what was I talking about?
Well, I'll tell you what, the times that I do that, every once in a while, I'll just say, we're coming to you live and unedited. And that gives me the ease to say, you know what? I don't even know what I just said there. Yeah. We're just going to keep going and just kind of roll with it.
I warned you guys in advance. Now it's your choice to continue on this journey.
Yeah. You've been warned.
Usually that's code for I was unprepared or something came up or something, right? I'm running out of time.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to switch gears for a second, get us off the podcast topic. You are part of the Royal Schofield Society, correct?
Yes, I am.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because that's like something that I've always been curious to hear more about, because we don't have something like that in Wisconsin.
Yeah, so I want to say it's 6 years old now. And basically it's a way for you to delve into more of your own Masonic thoughts. If you look at it from the outside in, I know when I first saw it, I thought, I'm going to go through this journey, and I'll explain the breakdown of what the steps are here in just a second. I'm going to go through this journey and think, you know what, I'm going to be all-knowing in Masonry after this. And I wasn't. It really gave me a more clear view on what I thought of Masonry. So it starts out, there's 3 steps, and each step has a certain amount of tasks that you have to do. The first one's 3, second one's 5, third one's 7.
Fancy that.
Kind of makes sense, right? Yeah, that was slick how they did that. I was not on the committee or group that created this. I've had a lot of them on the podcast: Chad Kopinski, Charlie Murphy, Jess Raines. So there's a lot of good information on that out there with full breakdown. But basically, what it is, it's delving into some of our back end membership. We use Grandview, and I know other ones use Maury. I think Indiana use Patriot, but there's some tests that are on there. The first 3 or 4 things you have to do are tests. Basically, you're looking in your code book. It gives you a reason to go in the code book when there's not a problem, or an installation. So to dust that off and get you looking through there and finding different things that you wouldn't normally find.
So that would be like we do have something for the code. We have the Wisconsin Masonic Code Correspondence course, which is essentially the same thing. Like, how well do you know code? It's an open book test, and you can, go through and find stuff in the code and familiarize yourself with it. Yep.
It's like 98 questions.
Yeah.
Oh my. Yeah. No, I don't think this is 98, but it's enough that I know there were times that I wanted to throw the book. I'm like,
Yep.
The index isn't telling me anything. I don't know. There's one of the questions. I'm looking at my desk like I have my deputy Joel here, but there's a different cluster of leaves that go around it, and one of them is to answer what leaf it is, and you have to go and find. It took me forever.
Geez.
I'm like, what is it? I don't know. Maple, oak, leather leaf. I don't know trees. So. But no, you start off with that. It's kind of quick. You can do it. You can do it kind of overnight if you're really into it, and then it starts spreading out. The next one's 5, and you start looking at who was your first line signer, and then who was their first line signer. So it kind of makes you dig through some old records a little bit. You also have to complete 3 visitations within your district.
Cool.
Okay.
So, a different place each time, so that you're just getting a taste of masonry. Masonry in your home lodge is your masonry, but you guys know lodge to lodge, things are so different. Just because of buildings, not even because of how they do things. And even after that, it starts to change. So you have to do that. You have to write a few papers on what you saw, what it meant to you. And then you move into that next section where it instinctively gets harder. You have to either give all 3 charges or 1 lecture. You have to visit 5 visitations outside of your district.
Oh,
which that's, for me. It's very nice that Pennsylvania is less than a quarter mile from my house, and it's 15 minutes to Elwood Parian Lodge, and we have some brothers that are dual members there, so we can go there. But we moved up to the 24th and 20th district that are around us just to see places and people that you normally wouldn't unless you're at annual communication.
sure.
Right.
So, and then, there's a section that you compare the religious writings, if you were using a Bible compared to a Quran, the different sections, and go back and forth on likeness and whatnot. On all of these, you're writing something, which for me was terribly scary because I don't write well at all. My writing's worse than my talking, and that's pretty bad. So we kind of got through all of that, and then the last one is called your masterpiece, and that would kind of be like your capstone.
Okay.
And it's very gray. It's actually the hardest part for me. Was you need to research something that you could possibly do to give back to Freemasonry, and we keep it with our Ohio Lodge of Research. They file it. It's got a lot of facets. Real quick, before I continue on with this, I skipped one that is really awesome, the Sprig of Acacia. I apologize, I'm hopping around here.
It's fine.
The Sprig of Acacia, you actually write a letter to your lodge, and the Grand Lodge sends it back to your lodge in 50 years.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
So you write whatever, thinking about what I wrote now, it's like, I wish I would have really put a lot. One gentleman wrote 27 pages of stuff, I don't. It's probably like a page and a half of.
It's a long communication.
I wish my stewards would walk straighter. I don't know what I wrote, but it's probably not that great. But jumping back to that masterpiece, it can be very dynamic. That's all these other ones are kind of set in what you need to do, and then we've had people make wooden artifacts, whether it's a voting box or something to that effect, and they used acacia wood, and their breakdown of this is they kind of write their paper on, I use this type of wood on this section of the handle because X, Y, and Z. Or I stained it darker here and lighter there. I made a video on Harry Truman.
Okay.
I was the first one that did a digital presentation instead of handing in a paper. I kind of like to make a movie.
Sure.
And so that was my forum. But everything's different. One gentleman talked about a local apple orchard owner and how their ties to his family eventually led to him becoming a master mason. So, there's a lot of different avenues that you can go down. So it's a pretty cool society to be a part of.
That is very neat.
I think that's fascinating in the way that the brethren who set that up and kind of thought of the various facets of it found such a creative way to be both academic and active at the same time, being like, I want you to learn something, I want you to challenge yourself to do something, but I also want you to like get out and move and actually create things that like enrichen, if that's a word, enrich your lodge, like the sprig of acacia, the letters coming back, like unique things that add like extra elements, the fact that people are creating things and papers and videos and boxes and whatever it might be to actually like give something back to the craft. I think that's fascinating. I love that idea. I think it's really cool.
That is very neat. So were you into traveling before doing the Royal Schofield stuff, or is that what kind of set you on the course of getting out there?
You know what? I was traveling a little bit beforehand. I don't want to say Schofield made me the traveler that I was going lodge to lodge. What actually started that, in our district, we have district or lodge inspections, and each year our lodge gets inspected on a degree. The deputy's there, whole spiel. It's kind of a big deal. We get probably our biggest turnout of the year is that night, other than an installation and whatnot. Okay. So our district, to encourage traveling and a competitive type of thing, we have a traveling gavel.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of people I see have certain artifacts or whatnot that they travel like. But that was my thought in 19 when I was master was, we've only won this traveling gavel award one time ever. And I want to win it for the whole year. And when you win it, you get to hold on to it the rest of the year. You get your name in a plaque. They got a plaque that like rotates around.
Sure.
So that was the big push. There was, at the time, there's 24 lodges in the 24th district. Wow. You can't win your own. So we had an opportunity at 22 of them, and we won 16 or 17, I want to say.
Nice.
And that's just simply bringing more brethren, or if you have the tie, you either flip a coin, or one of them they did, if you took everybody's age and what was the youngest, which we were young at that time. Mm-hmm. We are not young now. But, that was kind of the start. And just, I guess it was kind of the build up to the podcast was, in this travel was, I wanted to document it through social media. Sure. Not to tell everybody, wow, look what Jim Hall does. I'm not taking pictures so people think I'm a great traveler. I'm taking pictures so if somebody on my Facebook that I've tagged with Ryan, or maybe you guys or whatever, hasn't thought about masonry and sees that and says, wow, that looks like a lot of fun. Maybe I should check out Freemasonry. That was the whole goal. And it still is to this day is, let's get the word out. Same with the podcast is, let's get the word out to everybody, because I spent the better part of 10 years wondering how to be a Mason and didn't realize all I had to do was knock.
Yeah.
Right.
What's interesting, too, and I've seen a lot of those posts of you traveling around, and I know that you're friends with some of our listeners who I've seen. I think you have inspired them to do similar posting, like Worshipful Brother Adam Rigdon definitely likes to do that. And I think it's, every time I see those, I go, oh, cool, because it kind of reminds me, there's a documentary called Terra Masonica, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's basically they're going around all these parts in the world and looking at Masonic lodges, right? And they're talking to Masons and all this stuff. And I always love that documentary because I was like, it's cool to kind of see like the breadth of Freemasonry. And I think those posts kind of show off like how, I don't want to call it Masonic tourism, but kind of is fun. Like, oh, you're in this area, like stop by it, look at this cool building and check out these guys and all this cool stuff. I think it really gives people the itch to be like, oh, I should get out there and see these stuff. If I'm out on a business trip, maybe I should stop in a lodge and see what's going on, which I think does, it really enrichened or whatever.
You're just going to try to make that happen, aren't you?
It really I think it adds depth to the craft doing that type of stuff and being, a traveling man and doing that kind of good stuff.
I would agree. I mean, I'm somewhat well traveled myself. I've only gone like out of state. Well, I've gone out of state a couple of times, but like been down in Illinois once. Our district has what's called the Traveling Apron Award. So if you visit all the lodges in District 12 here in a year, but it's like from the day you start, you get 1 year to visit. We have, at the time I did it, there was 18 lodges still in the district. So I managed to visit all 18 lodges in a 12-month period. Well, nice. All 17 plus my own, right? And then last year we also have what's called the Traveling Lodge Award. So while I was master, I pushed for my lodge to do this. It had to be either the master or the wardens, and it had to be a total of one primary officer plus 2 other people that could, and you all had to accomplish that same goal. You all had to visit every other lodge in the district to get the Traveling Lodge Award, which thankfully we got done, which was awesome. But yeah, I like to get out there and travel. I've been down to Tennessee twice for the cave degree down there. Now, yeah, so that's a good time because it's always a different jurisdiction conferring down there. So they'll do one Friday night in the lodge room and then the MM in the cave on Saturday, but it's usually whoever conferred Friday night the following year will do the MM, and then so it's kind of like you're committing to 2 years if you decide to do it. But yeah, I like to get out there and move around myself. So
yeah, I don't know how you find the time, but you definitely get out there, be traveling. So
I haven't yet this year, but soon.
Sure. So what do you think now that you're the Traveling Man podcast, you got to be traveling all the time. What have you found is most rewarding about doing all this traveling and visiting all these lodges?
It's when I go out there and visit these places and take pictures and, like you said, when you look at the different lodges, they're all the same and completely different. So it's great to see them. And what I find out, what I love about it is I walk into a lodge and I'm going to do an interview with worshipful master, grand master, whoever it is, doesn't matter titles. By the time I'm done with that, there's a genuine want for me to come back to that lodge because it's like we're old friends.
Sure.
And it only takes, half hour, 2 hours, whatever that conversation is, to talk about, why I joined, why you joined, why it matters, why we do this. And that immediate bond that we have by being Masons is realized. And it's like, this is something that I love. I want to be back. I want to be to Indiana. I want to be to Dayton. We're supposed to go to the cave degree the next one. Myself and the other 2 district deputies have been talking about that. So, right, but that's, I call it the secret sauce. It's the meaningful connection. And, when you go there, it just makes me want to go back and visit all these people that maybe I didn't get a chance to the first time because they're awesome men and Masons doing great things, and I want to hear their stories.
Right on. I'm kind of sad that you're going to be going to the cave degree this year because I'm missing this year's. I'm going again in 26, and then I'll probably be down there in 27 and 28. We the 2 times we've gone down with we have a low 12 Masonic riders, so motorcycle group.
Yeah, sure.
And we decided we were going to go to Sturgis this year instead. So
okay, that's the good trip. So.
Yep.
What's interesting is I've traveled less extensively than both of you, for sure. But I have made efforts to travel at various times during my Masonic career, and I've visited lots of lodges. It's funny how quickly, I don't want to say I get possessive, but like any lodge I visit, whenever I see them, like, those are my boys. And every time I think good, I'm like, oh, I love those guys. Let's go. And and it could be, any lodge. And you're just like, oh, I went to one meeting. I'm like, oh, those are my guys now. Let's, when we're at the meeting this morning we had a masters and wardens breakfast so that we could talk about calendars, talk about advice and stuff like that. And every lodge I'd visit, when they stood up, I'd be like, oh yeah, there he is. There's my boy. You know what I mean? I get all excited.
You're one of those guys that if you had the ability to, you would plural every lodge in the district, I feel like.
Having a kid really put a kibosh on that, so thankfully it helped me temper myself. No, it's so fun to just... So, Jim, on this podcast, we talk a lot about lodge culture and how each lodge has this unique culture, different vibes, energies, dynamics, and all that fun stuff. And I went to school for anthropology originally with an archaeology focus. And so I always just taking in the various cultures, and there's pros and cons. I'll see things about a culture I like, I'll see things I dislike, but it always helps me understand like what to build for in my own lodge, where I'm like, they have this thing they're doing that's really, really good, and I think that's smart, and I think, I would have never thought of that, and stuff like that. And so it's hard because, we can become silos sometimes, where you're just like, you're in your own little bubble, same, cast of characters doing their same rambunctious stuff, and you're like, yep, there they are. And it's like when you step out, you can gain so much insight to be like, we really should start doing something like this. We should think about a program like this. We should, try to find fellowship opportunities or whatever it might be. But it's like so helpful. And, Matt's always said that when he was senior warden, that's when he did his traveling apron. And it was so he could come back with all this insight.
Yeah, I thought that was a good year to do it, as, trying to prepare for the East. And then, it allowed me to get the connections with the other lodges too right away, so that when their senior warden presumably would be in the East the same year as me, we already knew each other and we had somewhat of a rapport, right?
Yes, that's great. That's where I kind of said earlier, lodge is like an onion. Like, for anyone that saw Shrek, it has layers.
More like a parfait,
that's
right?
Where, it's like your home lodge, you start out, your home lodge is your guys. Like, that's your unit. And, you go to, when you start traveling, you kind of hang with those guys, and maybe you start talking to a couple people, or at least I did, because I'm shy to start. So, and then eventually it started to be like, well, my guys transformed to the 24th district. Now they were my guys. Like, I'm hanging around with them at communication and whatnot. And then it's like Ohio's my guys. So now I'm all over the place, and now it's Wisconsin, Indiana. That's where I say it's the onion of. Once you start traveling, you have that first step, and then it's the next circle, and then the next circle, and that's the beauty of it. It's the beauty of traveling.
Oh yeah, for sure. Can't disagree with that.
All right, I got a hard question I've been sitting on.
All right, you go for it.
So, Jim, for your reference,
sorry.
for your reference, I do a lot of social media as well for our lodge, and as well as for the Wisconsin Masonic Foundation, which is one of the charitable arms of Wisconsin Freemasonry. So I do a lot of social media stuff. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing Freemasonry today as far as digital media, and how, as Masons, should we be like, as any Joe Smo Lodge, what should Masons be doing to really try to, thrive in a modern era with the kind of all the social media we have?
So I think that's a two-tier question. And the first one is top down in social media in general, when I think about the foundation, or the Masonic home at Ohio, or the Grand Lodge, our main struggle is, are we reaching the right people that could be Masons? There are millions of people in Ohio. Well, there's only a finite amount of them that could be Masons. So a lot of targeting campaigns and things of that nature, so that we're looking at the people that we already know are Masons and what they like, and trying to target. That would be top level, and that's not the majority of guys out here. So I'll go more towards the local, and I think the main thing is just content on social media. And you'll see that I do East Palestine's social media, and obviously in the Traveling Man, but it's getting what you're doing out there. The worst thing that can happen to a local lodge is somebody say, "Oh yeah, I seen the sign. I don't know what happens. I don't know what you guys do." To me, that's a failure on the lodge's part. And they might be a great lodge, they may do great work, but if you're not engaging your local area, whatever that may be, whether you're rural, whether you're city, get out there, donate, sponsor, do your dinner clubs, and take pictures and tag everybody and everywhere. It's a very easy thing, but the more I've thought about it, and the more I've talked to guys that do social media, for people that don't know, you don't know what you don't know, and that's scary to them. Like, well, we're not sure if it's okay. It's like, if it's not a tiled lodge, it's okay. Just do it. But that's the thing, is content, and just try to spiderweb that out, all the good things that you're doing, and most importantly, smile in your pictures. Smile. There's nothing worse than seeing people that look like they just had the worst day of their lives.
So to your point, so when I do my social media stuff, I think of two separate tiers of why I post content. It would be one, sure, potential candidate's great, but that's not really the main reason. I kind of take that as a side victory. My main goal has always been to just make sure people remember we exist. So much of it is about visibility because, we deal with conspiracy and the otherwise, and I think a lot of that comes from misunderstanding, obviously, but also the fact that, you're not very visible. So in the shadows, people can make all sorts of whatever their creative minds want to think of, right? And so I've always thought about it as just show them what you're doing, show them you're having fun, because then they're like, oh, I can kind of get a picture of what's going on. They're having dinner, they're having fun, and it really sells, for a potential candidate being interested. You wouldn't believe the sheer number of leads that I get for potential candidates simply with the message, you were the only one that looked like you were alive. And I could tell that you were alive and you do stuff. It's like everyone else, they might have been, but they haven't posted in 7 years. So I kind of just assume that maybe they closed up. I don't know. You can't, like you mentioned, you can't just walk up to the door and walk in. So you kind of need to have a line. And so a lot of the reason that I've been pushing, especially to smaller lodges that are like, we really need just a little extra energy, a little life in this lodge. It's like, show them what you're doing so the world, they can't find you if they don't know you exist. They can't, we are engaged in a different way. Like the era of, and I love going to march in a parade, but the era of see a group of Masons in a parade and show up in a lodge is kind of a bygone era. It's still cool to see, but it's really engaging with people where they are. You know what I mean?
Well, you hit it right on the head with, we didn't even know you existed. When I joined, I was going in for our installation of officers. I was getting installed as senior steward way back when I had hair and less weight. And my father-in-law said, I've lived in town 65 years. I don't know what that building inside looks like. What do they do? And I got up there that night. I'm like, am I allowed to take a picture of this? Because I didn't know then. Mm-hmm. And that's what they told me. Like, it's an open thing, if we're not tiled. And that was it. That was our first, if you look on our Instagram, I don't know how many thousands of posts before, it's a picture of the 20, I don't know what year. Mm-hmm. those guys, officers, and it's grainy, it's bad, it's the wrong angle, all that stuff. But that was it. And then from there, that thought always kept in my head, like, man, how can you live in a place your whole life and not know? And it's because nobody ever said, hey, here we are. Look at what we do.
Yep. And I think when I first started doing social media, Matt used to have some experience doing it he was a member of the local hog chapter. And he was like, your goal is just minimum one post a week. He's like, just a week should not go by without finding something. If it's not something directly related to what we're doing, you can post something just about masonry or in general, just to make sure you're getting your quota. And what I found is when I first started, I was doing a lot of quote posting, look here's Teddy Roosevelt's quote, let's go. But as time went on, I started realizing our lodge does so much that I'm basically drowning in post opportunities where I'm like, I need to stop posting because I'm flooding people. So you find that if you're intimidated about doing or starting social media at your lodge, it really just takes a little while before you start going, oh, we do have a lot to share. We have a lot to show people. And it's huge. I mean, if you're a lodge that doesn't use social media versus one that does, you're at a huge disadvantage in the modern era. And so it's something to really pay attention to.
Absolutely.
For sure. You got anything else up your sleeve over there?
I mean, I can always think of something, but why, you got a question in mind?
Well, I was just trying to figure out if we were ready for the question. He is a past master after all.
Let's see how much time we're at. We'll see if we want to do the question. Yeah, we probably could do the question if you like. All right.
So last year, prior to last year, shortly after we started the podcast was right before I was going into the East. So I was going around and asking every past master I could find what their one piece of advice to a new worshipful master would be. So then we kind of brought that question on the podcast for any time we are talking to a past master. So my question for you is, what would be your one piece of advice for an incoming worshipful master or a soon-to-be worshipful master? And this is now relevant for Andrew, as he's currently senior warden.
You're talking to me right now.
So I'm not gonna lie. First off, I'm jealous that I never thought of this question. I wrote it down because that's a great question. My advice would be break the glass. Don't let a past master tell you no because we didn't do it that way. It won't work. Who cares? Go do it. If it fails, okay. It failed. It fell on his face. Whatever. But if you have a vision, an idea, a thought, hold on to that. Motivate those guys. You can't be a dictator. You're going to lose all of your help. You got to be a motivator. Be a spark plug. But break the glass. Do something new. Do something exciting. Because if you just do the status quo, it'll always just be the status quo. Be dynamic and break the glass.
That's a great piece of advice.
I think it's super helpful because, I mean, and, we all listen to Masonic podcasts, and you hear over and over the stereotype of the obstinate past master who obstructs. If only I would have, if only there weren't these past masters complaining at me, then I could have done everything. But it steals the agency away from the master, where it's like, no, you could have broke the glass. Like, you chose to.
You're the boss.
Because the past master's counsel is important, but it's counsel, right? It's up to you to make the decision still at the end of the day. So I think that's great advice, even though maybe some past masters will be mad about it.
Yeah, whatever. That's great advice.
Well, the thing is, you're right. You'll get grumbles. But what'll happen is if you continue to have that vibrancy and excitement, and, I've lived it, and that's why I can speak to it, is they buy in. Because, nobody likes change. I don't like change. Are you kidding me? I got to go here tonight. I wasn't supposed to do anything. I wanted to stay in my house. But, once you do that and prove to them, like, wow, this actually works. Look at this. And they start to buy in. And it's like change is slow. But if you do it and continue to do it, they'll buy in and follow. And then they'll be your biggest supporters. And that's the best part of it, teaching those guys new tricks.
I agree.
It's like it's like Gandalf and the Hobbit trying to get Bilbo out the door. You just need a little bit of a nudge, and then he's like, "All right, I'm going to Erebor."
Oh, well, since you brought up books, by the way, I think I've been getting back into reading a little bit since I've been out of the East, and I've heard you talk about the Wheel of Time so many times that I think I'm going to have to try to read it.
So two things, because you brought up the Hobbit, so I have to talk about this real quick. We just started a group. There's 1 past and 3 current deputies from across the state that it's like a Tolkien book club.
Oh, nice.
Masonic. And we read, and admittedly, I'm the one that hasn't finished. I've already read it once, but we're supposed to read it and then get together and talk. I haven't finished The Hobbit, so they're waiting on me, and then we get together and have a few drinks and BS about it. So The Hobbit, I'm a huge fan, but Wheel of Time, unbelievable. And you got to be prepared that it's long. They're 800, 900 page books.
And there's 14 of them, something like that.
Or 14 of them in a smaller pre-equal, which I would suggest reading after the 5th or 6th, so you know all the people and can tie it together. But and Robert Jordan's the author is a Mason.
Oh, really?
Right.
I think I knew that.
Kind of.
Yeah.
When you're reading, I haven't read them since I was a Mason. I've read them a few times through before. Thinking back, it's like there are little aspects that shine through, even though he didn't outwardly put it out until the end. It was kind of his private thing. But expect a lot of reading. He really goes into detail on what the area looks like, so that can get redundant. But it's like watching a movie when you read them. Like I've seen the movies; they're unbelievable. So.
I might have to check that out after I'm done. I'm still trapped in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere for right now.
I just came across a video. There's this one girl on social media. She lives in Canada. I think she's originally from somewhere else, but she does bookbinding, and she'll take series of books and bind them all together into one giant volume. And she did it with all the Wheel of Time books, and that stack was just gigantic.
That sounds irresponsible, to be honest.
I don't know how could you move that? You need a dolly or something.
I don't think she could, but she had it up on the table, and with them all stacked on top of each other, it was taller than she was sitting on her table. Like it was huge. If I find the link for it, I'll make sure to send it to you, because I can't remember her screen name right now, but I know my wife follows her as well. So
yeah, send that and a tie-in. You said Brandon Sanderson, and if you don't know this, if you do, okay. But Robert Jordan actually, after book 11, I think 11 or 12, passed away. He had a blood disease, and Brandon Sanderson wrote the last 2.5 or 3 books. He had it laid out how everything was, but if you like Sanderson, he actually really he speeds the series up, and once you read it, you'll understand kind of how Robert Jordan's pacing is. And then, the first time I started reading, I'm like, oh, what is this? But then it's like, oh, that's great. I already know what an oak tree looks like. We can just keep rolling. It's been 11 books of the oak tree or whatever. So,
Right.
Cool.
So.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, Worshipful Brother, thank you so much for joining us today. A reminder to our listeners, you can hear way more of Worshipful Brother Jim talking on his podcast, the Traveling Man Podcast.
Traveling Man Masonic Podcast.
The Traveling Man Masonic Podcast. Got to get all the words. And you can listen to him anywhere you can find podcasts.